Second week in a row, we got an F1 race review. Chinese Grand Prix, boring race, very unboring aftermath.
I was going to say, not all boring.
I was excited to talk Oscar Piastri. I was excited to talk Max Verstappen. I was even excited to talk Haas because I'm so impressed that they had guys finish where they did, like pulling those tractors in the big jump they've made. But it all starts with Ferrari getting a double DQ. First time this has happened in 75 years. Lewis Hamilton was disqualified for his skid board being below regulation. We'll get into the info on that. And then Charles Leclerc, the car being underweight. Pierre Gasly was also disqualified for Alpine. Same thing. Car was underweight. So everything's in kilograms weight-wise in F1. Car has to be 800 kilograms at the end of the race without the gas. Charles Leclerc was 799 kilograms disqualified. Lewis Hamilton's a more interesting one. His skid board was 0.5 millimeters below regulation. So if you're watching or listening, pull out your wallet, grab your driver's license, hold it sideways. That is basically how short it was from being under regulation. And for that reason, Lewis Hamilton got a DQ. They both finished in the top 10. That's a lot of points that Ferrari's missing out on.
Yeah, this was a fifth and a sixth slot taken away from these two guys.
18 points.
18 crucial points.
Yep.
Because they didn't start the season how they wanted to. There's all this pressure around Hamilton performing now that he is with Ferrari, now that he's reunited with certain coaches and whatnot. They thought that the communication mishaps and the shifting mishaps in Melbourne were going to be, the last and the least of the drama around Ferrari, and then you get these DQs. Mm-hmm. The worst part about it is to see how excited Hamilton was. A historic sprints race for Ferrari.
They're lucky he recovered points there.
Are you kidding me? And then he gets on the stage. He's sitting between Verstappen and I believe it was Lando. And he's like, it's like, I don't remember what this feeling's like. Or I don't know what this feeling's like. Like the joy around him feeling like he actually has a season ahead of him. And then this happens.
I know.
By a license by what you just explained there.
Yeah.
The pinch.
And it's a wooden plank, too. It's so funny. These like $20 million machines. It's a piece of wood.
Of all things.
And it is something that the reason that rule is in there is because you can't have the car too low to the ground because everything's aerodynamics with these. And if it's that low, then you're just fighting that much less air. You're getting that much less resistance. And it's just, again, to provide parity. But for him winning the sprint race, he still got 8 points. Ferrari's so lucky for that.
So lucky. So lucky, because then the next topic of conversation that comes into this is that if I'm Ferrari, and you and I talked about it last time we got to chat F1, I'm heading into this Grand Prix and I'm like, this track is built for our players. I mean, our racers. This track is built for our cars. And it is, because people were not expecting McLaren to have such a clear route on any of this because their cars are usually built for a lot of those windier routes, those heavier turns, and they were able to perform well on those straight liners. And so Ferrari being discounted by that small bit, it just asks you, how many more mistakes is Ferrari going to make during this? Because when there was any conversation about Hamilton going to Ferrari, it was like, could he manage in that car? Is he finally going to get the car that he deserves? Now you come in, you have communication issues, and now you have this underweight issue and then the plank situation. Like, it's just too messy of a start.
And they're now 61 points behind McLaren. They have 78 because of how well they did. And the difference of these DQs is them being 1 point behind Red Bull for third place, who is struggling on their own, Liam Lawson. We'll talk about that. Instead, they're tied with Williams at 17 points on the season. Australian Grand Prix really ruined the start to their season. Then they have this. And it's just, what goes into it too, it's Ferrari. Like we've seen the negligence on their strategy with tires in a race and just pit stops and just the misplanning of double boxing when they shouldn't be, and what they've gone through with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Now you have Lewis Hamilton. And that is the second fastest car on the grid. And they wasted away like this. The one that stinks for Leclerc, now this was a potential two-stop race. Ferrari did it once. And it simply was, if they did a second stop, maybe if Charles Leclerc pitted a lap or two later and those tires were just not as worn down, he easily would have had the kilogram or two needed
to make weight.
Exactly. But that's a point of, you only do one change. You only change the tires once. And you do at the point of the race. Got them to where they were in that position, but it cost them in this one. That's a tough one to stomach. And that is one where they're going to look back. The Lewis Hamilton one, though, and when you get to a sprint race weekend, is everything's changing quick. He did good in the sprint race. They made a switch before qualifying. It didn't work out. They tried to make another switch before the race. And that's what may have led to this. And again, it costs them crucial points.
But it's planning. That's like the failed planning is where you want to be shocked with Ferrari for one. For two, let's just put this into context. I've been a Leclerc gal for quite some time, since he got in. But my thing is like seeing where Leclerc's record picks up. It's usually mid to later in the season. So now you're looking at kind of a margin between your driver one and your driver two. You have no margin for error because McLaren has two top drivers. Piastri is coming into this looking to collect his exactly. So they have the best car. They've got two top drivers in the mix. You're looking at almost a steal in points every time you hit the track. There's a bit of a gap when it comes to Hamilton and Leclerc, and this is with so much love for Leclerc, but his driving doesn't pick up until mid to end season. So you can't lose out on points like this because you're looking at one driver collecting for the team as a whole, and it's not enough to start the season like this. Yeah,
and especially with how well that they've done between Lando and Oscar Piastri. Of course, Lando won the Australian Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri turns around and wins the Chinese Grand Prix, and he got a total of 32 points on the weekend too. So it's beyond winning the race, and that's where they're at. And the Australian Grand Prix kept everything open, and Oscar dominated the race. We even saw that McLaren committed to him to win it as well.
Yeah.
He raced so well from start to finish. Lando is dealing with braking issues as well. He even commented, he's like, I'm lucky I had brakes towards the end. But it's just that gap is so big. And in the best thing possible, McLaren, they're going to have, to your point, like the midpoint of the season, when we're about 12 races in or so, and changes will be made, they're going to have the difficult decision of, okay, who do we go with? Do we go with Oscar? Do we go with Lando to bring home the World Drivers' Championship? That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of expectations. Ferrari's car is good. You think they get it back on track? George Russell's driving phenomenal with a inferior Mercedes car. And if Red Bull can get something out of their second driver, the way Max is pushing that machine too,
margin,
that's a one. And so they'll have the choice of 25-year-old Lando, who has 130 career races, or 23-year-old Oscar, who has 48 career races. But I know when you talk to people around the sport, the potential, a lot of people look at Oscar as like the one.
Yeah.
McLaren has by far the best car. They won the Constructors last year. They again have the fastest car. They're in a great position right now. And it was great to see what they've done, where you get Lando winning it last week, a double podium finish this week, and carrying it on that way.
Yeah, that is going to be the tough question, and it's funny because it takes me back to last season where they had that bit of a botch race where it was like Piastri was clear to like be their guy to collect the points on that one, and then Lando kind of had a bit of a tissy fit because he's the one who got off to the faster start. He basically paved the way for Piastri, and Piastri was able to take advantage of the clearing. With that being said, I think because of the narrow miss of points of Lando being on the heels of Verstappen, I think that as a club, they're going to make sure that Lando's in a more promising position to take what he deserves this year.
Yeah.
It's not just the experience. The difference between him and Piastri, weirdly enough, even though there's a little bit of an age gap, so minute. Piastri drives like he's been doing this for 25 years.
Yeah, he's so good.
Really smart out there.
Yeah.
He's so even-keeled. He's really smart. He has a really good line of communication with his team. And I think that that's where, if it comes down to it and the races get too close, they're going to want wise beyond his years and that even kill temper for Piastri, because there's some miscues that Lando tends to bite on in certain races. Yeah. He had a couple of them in this previous race. So when you're looking at the guy who's going to be able to kind of consistently get you further, Piastri's making a really large case right now.
Yeah. And that's where we know Lando, the pressure has gotten to him in the past, but he's even corrected his shortcomings. Like last year, all the podiums he had and he blew them. That's not happening this year. He's having really good starts from the jump of the race,
True.
Fighting off the drivers behind them. That's where, again, I can't make a read on McLaren yet, and we won't be able to even make a read on Red Bull or Mercedes or Ferrari at this point. It's going to have to be later in. But McLaren, they have the cushion, even thinking of what Verstappen has done, for him to have the fourth fastest car on the grid, and he's in second place, only behind Lando for the leader in the driver standings by 8 points as well. He's doing so good.
He's so hard to keep out of the mix.
Yeah.
He's so hard to keep out of the mix. I think that, again, just from a team perspective, the drop off between him and the driver coming up behind him is going to be different. Where McLaren is also kind of going to continue to take a leap here is Lando's really good at defensive driving. Like,
Yeah.
if it comes down to it and they head into a race and they think, okay, Lando gives off to a quick start, Piastri manages all the details in between, like, he's a really good defensive driver and hard to get around when it makes it clear that Piastri is going to hit the podium for them. So I would say right now, not only having the best car, but just kind of having the best approach to these tracks. It just saddens me because I was so excited for Ferrari's season with Hamilton, but that conversation around the car, it's just getting louder and louder because you can't have like dumb mistakes, and it's deflating to a guy like Hamilton who's already coming in this with so much pressure on his shoulders. But maybe he could still ride the high of the sprint and see what takes place next. I think, what do they have? Japan coming up.
Japanese Grand Prix is next, and there'll be a break. There needs to be an opening for McLaren. I just don't see them making a mistake.
No.
That's a thing of their car is so far ahead already. They couldn't afford a weekend like this. And
No.
and the double DQ is what's so damning.
If it was one of the Ferrari racers,
especially the weight of Charles Leclerc, like that happens sometimes. It literally happened to Pierre Gasly in the same race. But the double DQ is what kills them. To at least be in the mix for the constructors, because they were right there. They just missed out on winning the constructors. And here's the thing too of Red Bull. Let's get into that conversation. Liam Lawson again did not perform well.
Yeah.
Now he did do better. He went from a DNF in Australia, was supposed to finish 15th, finished 12th after the DQs of Gasly, Hamilton, and Leclerc. But Yuki Tsunoda is driving the VCARB really well. And for as challenging as his Red Bull car is, like if he takes that jump for them and how well Max is driving, that is Red Bull taking advantage of. Now Ferrari team well behind them, but just to be right behind for if McLaren makes a slip up. Is that best for Liam Lawson though? I don't know.
It's probably not, but I will say this. The trajectory of Yuki's career, he's right on track to make noise right now. He actually, one of his F1 training coaches was formerly Mike Italiano. He was with Danny Ricciardo. And that was when Danny was in his prime in terms of like, healthy, maxing out on these big races and stuff like that. And Yuki, I heard, has just been like a tremendous translator into like figuring out his racing style and rising to the occasion. So kind of having Danny's old coach, they've been working together for a handful of years now silently. Like, I think the expectation is that it's Yuki's breakout season for sure.
And even Red Bull going into this race, they had Liam Lawson start from pit lane instead of on the grid. And that was because they had to do so many changes to his setup for his car. They're trying to figure him out. And this is a guy that did P20 and then before that had P18, like even in the qualifying time. And he's over a minute behind Max. Ooh. Like that's where he did the upgrade. I mean, from a straight DNF, but like to finish 12th is still good. But it's for him, it's just such a big struggle, and that's what doesn't make sense. To be a minute off the pace from a Max Verstappen, to be off, anyone would be that, but a minute off of the same car, essentially, it's hard to figure out. But as Liam Lawson, if he continues to improve, then maybe he's figuring the car out. You don't want to pull the plug too early and shatter his confidence. But this is Yuki about to be in his 5th year as a driver. Liam Lawson now has 11 races under his belt. It was questionable why they gave that seat to Liam Lawson instead of Yuki Tsunoda. I wouldn't be shocked if Yuki makes a jump from VCARB to Red Bull, and then you let Liam Lawson still race and figure it out. Yeah. It didn't make sense before. It's certainly questionable right now.